It was a small law firm, about 4 or 5 lawyers, and I just saw there was a lot of kind of ways that tech could help improve various processes in at the firm. And so I would kind of complain a bit to a mutual friend of ours, and he's in finance. And eventually he had been hearing what Jimoh was thinking about law from a machine learning, natural language processing, AI side. And I was kind of just fumbling in the dark and talking about tech. And so he connected us. And then the two crazy people at the party got to meet.
Yeah.
Today on Law Next, we're going to speak with the founders of Ross Intelligence, Andrew Arruda, who's now the CEO, and Jimoh
Ovbiagele. No one's ever got it, so don't feel bad about it.
I think the over-under was at the office.
I practiced before we started.
You almost had it.
I knew I was going to get it. Ovbiagele.
Nice.
Jimoh Ovbiagele. I'm sorry.
Best second try.
And not that Ambrogi is any easier of a name to pronounce, but it gets. But anyway, this is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs of who are driving what's next in law. We do have to start the whole thing over again.
No worries.
We should start the whole thing over again.
That was fun though.
Yeah, I know. We could leave it. All right, we'll leave it. What the heck? What do we care?
Yeah.
It's only a podcast. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, on to this week's interview. So I am actually here in Toronto today, sitting here live with Andrew and Jimoh, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. I've been spending the day meeting with a number of different people who work for Ross and getting to know a little bit more about who's behind the product and what the product's looking like at this point. But you guys were really one of the first, if not the first, intentionally AI-driven legal research products out there on the market. I mean, Thomson Reuters will tell you we've had AI for forever and whatever, but you guys are really kind of the first that started to do it. And so I'd love to just start with kind of how you guys got together and started working on this in the first place.
Yeah, I blame Jimoh. So I guess I'll kick it off and then you can jump in. I feel like it all happened in 2015, and I think it was a lot of really good luck, to be honest, where it was myself. I had finished law school. I was working at a law firm. I had been working at that law firm and even doing my undergrad. I would take night courses so I could work at the firm and pay my way through. And at the time that I had started Ross, I think I had been working at that firm for maybe 6 years, 7 years at that point. And throughout that period, it was a small law firm, about 4 or 5 lawyers. And I just saw there was a lot of kind of ways that tech could help improve various processes in at the firm. And so I would kind of complain a bit to a mutual friend of ours, and he's in finance. And eventually he had been hearing what Jimoh was thinking about law from a machine learning, natural language processing, AI side. And I was kind of just fumbling in the dark and talking about tech. And so he connected us. And then the two crazy people at the party got to meet.
Yeah. And while Andrew was working at the law firm, I was studying computer science at the University of Toronto, focusing on artificial intelligence. I had first got my start in AI at the University of Texas, actually working on self-driving cars, developing intelligent systems to help them navigate the world. But then I ended up pivoting towards neural networks, brain-inspired algorithms that could be used to understand and generate language. And I started thinking about where this technology could have the biggest impact. And I thought back to how when I was younger, when my mom needed a lawyer, she didn't have that many options available to her because of her income. She was a single mother of 2. And I thought back to my conversations with Andrew, him talking about how he did legal research, how he started really broad and did searches within searches and Boolean and for hours on end. And I was just like, what if we could get a machine learning system to do that for you? And he was just like, is that possible? And I was just like, yeah. And yeah,
It was really funny because I kept asking you, what's possible now, and is this something kind of in the future? Is this Star Trek? And a lot of people don't know this, but Toronto has really been the epicenter of a lot of the modern AI movement, and so there is a distinct Canadian kind of leadership in the space, and I think that's why, when you mention us being the first to kind of really come out with a company that we said was an AI legal company. I think that was because of us being from Toronto, where, we had great professors, including Professor Jeff Hinton, who was really kind of you're the godfather of legal tech. He's the godfather of deep learning. And so he had really been putting in decades of work to get to a point where systems were starting to do things that, quite honestly, were, especially coming from the legal world, I was just completely blown away by. Mm-hmm. And so when Jimoh said what was happening, where things were, I knew that it was only a matter of time before things would come to the law. And I thought to myself, this probably is going to be bigger than the internet. And I think eventually I was like, why couldn't it be us to help kind of make it happen?
Yeah.
And how did you decide to tackle the legal research as a use of machine learning in the legal space? I mean, you could have gone after, I don't know, document management, like a lot of people are doing, or contract management, or something else. How did you focus in on that sort of problem and come about a way of trying to address it?
2 reasons. The pain point was real. It was a burning pain that lawyers have, and the suitability of the technology to the problem. And then also there's the
suitability of the technology. You mean because you've got data that the machine can use as source to learn from and get better at?
Yeah, exactly. And it's also a hard problem. And if we solve this problem, what we could do after that, because of the technology that we've developed, the opportunities are enormous. Just like when Google tackled search, that technology that it developed, it's using in all of its different web services. Yeah. So we are in legal research today, but we think in decades, and this is just step one.
So you got going 2014, 2015, got together. You were, I think you told me earlier, you were 22 years old then, Jimoh? And
it depends on when you start counting, 21 and turning 22. Yeah,
and you were you're an old man.
I was an old man in Silicon Valley at that point. I was 24. And now I just turned 30 not too long ago. I feel like I've really kind of paid my dues now.
It is weird. Being 26 in Silicon Valley, I was like, oh, I'm old.
But yeah, so we started
especially then. Since you guys both made the Forbes 30 under 30 one year, right? So now you're did it have to like excise your name from the magazine?
Yeah, now it's 40 under 40. So
that's like a couple years.
Yeah. So I mean, I think, it's funny though, Bob, that you mentioned that. I think that was definitely part of us and the drive to do this, because when I remember us sitting down and sketching things out, and it was all we knew that there was a problem. We knew that the technology was getting to a point where you could build a lot of the things that we wanted to build. And I think if I had known how hard it was going to be, who knows if we would kind of pursue it. But at the time, when you're that young and that exuberant, you just kind of do it. And so I do think that there's an element of when you talk about entrepreneurship, just kind of not knowing is always a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad we went through it. We've built out the team. You got to meet so many amazing people, and I think we're so lucky to kind of be where we are. But that journey is something that's really tough, and I think us being young and a little bit, I think the naivete
naive,
was I think
committing to thing before you know all the problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were some of the first steps from there? I know you were involved in an IBM Watson competition at some point that I think, if I recall, you came in second, but it was a close call.
Yeah. Close call.
So what was that? What happened? That was through the University of Toronto? Was that?
Yeah, that was through the University of Toronto. They wanted to hold a competition to see what sort of applications people could make with some of their Watson services. So we competed in Toronto locally, and then we went to New York to compete against other schools like the University of Texas and Stanford. And we ended up getting beat by the University of Texas, which was my old school. So that was a bit bittersweet. But
that was funny because I remember being there, and I think you had known some of the folks on that team too.
I knew those folks.
So it was fun. But we did win in Toronto, and then we went to New York for that competition. And I think what was neat about that was about how we were already getting exposure to the idea that we were on the right track. And it was a good way to kind of catapult us forward, not to jump into it.
Yeah, that brought you a little more attention. I mean, you were probably already getting some attention at that point, but that brought more to you. You got some press coverage.
Yeah, Globe and Mail, New York Times of Canada.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. That's when my mom was okay with me dropping out of school. She's just like, "Oh, you've made it." I was like, "Mom, this is great, but there's a lot of hard work ahead."
My parents will still introduce me as a lawyer at family events.
Really? I mean, they must be pretty proud of.
They
must be pretty proud of what you've done here.
Yeah, they certainly are. I think it was tough though, especially early days when you want to jump into a field. There wasn't a lot of legal technology successes to point to. I think we've seen so many great examples of that as even, e-discovery companies have matured and they're gone public and have been huge successes, which was already starting at that point, obviously already very mature in many ways. But then when now you look at companies like Clio, who's doing, really, really well and scaling and continuously growing, there wasn't really that going on. And so choosing to leave, and both Jimoh and I come from pretty modest backgrounds, and starting a company, that's tough. And then also choosing to do it in law, which is a tough space. I mean, it hasn't happened before, so you don't have playbooks that you can necessarily use. And you can obviously use startup playbooks that are generalized, but there is a unique aspect of going into an older guild-like established industry and saying that you've created a new tool or a new way to do something better with a new type of technology.
Right. Well, I'm sure, I mean, where we are today, it's become common to talk about AI, and just about every press release I get in my email inbox every day talks about AI in some way, shape, or form. But even not that long ago, 2015 certainly seems like a long time ago in terms of having that conversation. So, I mean, you were probably faced a little bit of an uphill battle and just getting people to even listen to you talk about this.
And take us serious. I mean, when we would say artificial intelligence, I mean, we still get sometimes people asking us where the robot is. But back then, I mean, we were asked where the robot was a lot.
Yeah. And it was not just educating the legal market. I mean, even venture capitalists in tech didn't really understand AI.
Yeah.
So that just added to the complexity of things.
Yeah. But you did get the Y Combinator people.
Yeah, we got Y Combinator
to listen. So
that was really great. And what was fun about the Y Combinator thing was it allowed us we then moved from Toronto to California.
Was it just the two of you still at that point?
Also
in Pargles.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then shortly thereafter, we hired our employee number one and started to grow the team there. So we actually grew the team there before, and then we opened our Toronto office and moved. Jimoh moved back, and
moved back. Yeah.
But
Pargles is the third co-founder, and I'm blanking on his last name. It is
Daulio. We make things very difficult.
Yeah. Could get a John Smith in here or something.
Although I was at an event where Bob was introduced as Bob M. Brogy.
Oh, my name gets totally distorted all the time.
So the Y Combinator thing was really great because the legal world was excited about what we were doing, and now the tech world at large was excited about what we were doing. And as Canadian entrepreneurs, getting our foot in the door into the U.S. startup ecosystem, specifically in Silicon Valley, was kind of like, I don't know what the analogy would be, like showing up in Hollywood and seeing all the cast and characters from the movies, you know. So you get there and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's so and so, like that person, their company was acquired by Google, that person scaled that company up to X amount of users. And so it instilled in us this idea where what was possible. We had such great mentorship, and some of our best mentors continue to be from that ecosystem. It instilled in us the possibility and the idea that you're going to do this, you can do this, and it was a fabulous experience.
Yeah, it was like Andrew was saying, like just like learning, seeing, understanding the winning mindset and attitudes of the entrepreneurs there, especially the ones who were partners at Y Combinator, was extremely helpful, and I think it gave us the confidence to really and the knowledge to really take things to the next level.
Yeah.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, let's continue this week's interview.
So other than people's familiarity with AI, what were some of the challenges or obstacles that you were faced kind of early on in trying to grow this company?
Well, I think some of it's kind of funny. Well, because when you consider if we're trying to talk to an AmLaw 10 or 20 firm, and we ended up signing early on. I mean, Denton's even invested in us, and we were their first investment from a large law firm who started an investment arm. We had a lot of those wins, but when you think about it, you see it in a press release, but what you don't see is, you know, Jimoh, Parglaz, myself, maybe employee number one, and just us sitting at a table being like, okay, how do we prepare for this meeting? How do we get and there's 4 or 5 people as a company, and you're talking to the world's largest law firm, and they're piloting your system, and they're asking things like, you know, how much support am I going to be able to get, and this and that, and can it do this and can it do that? And it's those early days that I miss a lot of, especially as the team's gotten, as you saw, like really big, and we have people doing everything. It was just kind of, I think that those were some of the challenges, where it was just going to those meetings. And also, when you're building a product early days, there's, you know, there'll be a bug here, there'll be a bug there. And so navigating that. And I remember my favorite one was, I think it was a week or two in to us kind of pitching teams. The head of a law firm really liked us, and they said, I got our head librarian is coming by, and then Ross was on a mobile device. It was on an Android tablet. Yeah. And so it was also speech text, so you could speak out loud to it.
Right.
And so the research librarian came in, and we were very nervous because, you know, they really know research better than anyone else. And at the time, it was employment law in Canada, and we were starting to play around with bankruptcy law in the U.S. And they asked a question, and the results came back from Ross, and they looked up, and they were like, "Yeah, actually, those are pretty on point." And I remember just breathing out such a huge sigh of relief because it was, you know, it's those early days. So I think that's what I remember the most.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know just from direct experience that sometimes in those early days you're kind of improvising in the sense of you're getting having to deal with people or answer questions that maybe haven't come up before, and and make promises that maybe the staff hasn't quite been hired yet. But,
And on the staff, so staffing, hiring, and building a team to solve these problems was a challenge.
Yeah.
Right? Because we had to hire software engineers. We had to hire machine learning engineers.
Right.
NLP engineers and lawyers as well. So we had to get the smartest people in every position on the field. And for the lawyers, we had to convince them to leave their jobs after investing so much in law school, and for the engineers,
that wasn't that hard, was it?
It actually was. Yeah, it wasn't that hard. It was a pretty sweet deal.
Actually,
He's like, "Do you want to work 12-hour days?"
It's about finding the right ones.
The right ones. Yeah, not the ones who are trying to jump ship.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
And then
I was talking to one of the lawyers on your staff today who said she's having more fun now than she's ever had as a lawyer.
yeah, she's having a lot of fun. Yeah. But even hiring the convincing engineers, don't go to Facebook, don't go to Google, don't work on ad algorithms. Come work on like making the law more navigable, accessible.
It's going to be a tough sale to somebody if they're weighing Google versus some little startup company trying to help with the law.
It worked.
It worked. Yeah, and I think I mean, recently we've made some great announcements about additions to the team. Obviously, Jack Newton joining our board has been great, and also
the CEO of Clio, the founder and CEO of Clio,
who's just fabulous. And I also, his guidance is great. But like even directly on the team on a day-to-day basis, we brought in Sturgios, who you met today as well, and had some great convos with. And he was former director of engineering over at Shopify and helped build their team from very small to very large numbers. And so when it's a really amazing thing, I think, and I count us to be very lucky to be able to come up with an idea that people could rally behind. And the idea of democratizing the legal space and to make sure that legal information is accessible, navigable, and easy to kind of interact with did get people passionate. But then you also have to build the product.
Right.
You have to find the right people. You have to raise the venture capital money. You have to ensure that you travel to all the different conferences and raise awareness within the space.
Right.
You have to raise awareness with the right people. So you want to make sure that you're getting the product in front of people who make purchasing decisions at firms, but at the same time, ensuring the product is getting in front of end users. So it's, and you sat in on one of our fun kind of UX meetings. There's a lot of things that you have to consider, even in what would appear from the face of something to be almost like a simple interaction, especially if you're doing it right. Yeah. And we really want to make sure everything's as...
Yeah, the devil's in the detail.
Yeah. So how have you financed all this?
Yeah, so this has been a venture capital funded initiative, and oftentimes that's what happens with startup. I think even that has changed so much since we started. When we started, we were some of the first legal tech investments that different venture capitalists had made in different funds, and now they've actually made multiple investments. I actually met in San Francisco not too long ago with a venture capitalist who's now saying that he's really starting to go with a legal tech thesis. So asked me to make other introductions, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So we started venture capital backed and also some really great individuals, some kind of angels that came on early as well.
Yeah. You raised, I know you raised, what was it, a 4.3 round early on, like 2015.
Yeah.
Right. And then a 8.7 2017?
Yep. 2017, yeah. And then we have some more announcements around that too. So, yeah.
Well, here you are. Here's
yeah. Well, you know what? I'm just trying to get on another podcast with you. So
the hook to the next one. Yeah. But really great investors. I mean, like you said, Y Combinator, Inovia, Comcast Ventures.
Yeah.
Some really great
it's been
folks.
interesting to see a lot of the big Silicon Valley firms getting interested in this space. So how has the product evolved since the beginnings up to where we are today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in kind of from a perspective of end user, and Jimoh, you could jump in kind of infrastructure and kind of your thoughts from a machine learning standpoint. But I think when we started in Canadian law, labor and employment, and then we're playing around with other practice areas. And then when we moved down for Y Combinator, we started building within U.S. bankruptcy law. And that was really fun. We worked out some kinks there, added on intellectual property, added on labor and employment. Last year released ROS across every practice area. And then once we were really operating and really solving, you have a legal research question, we get you to your answer and to that aha moment faster than anyone else, offering insights you might miss on other platforms. That's where we focused on. But I think lately what we've been doing is taking things and doing things that no one else is really doing, and some things you saw today, where you can start to ask Ross questions that include facts of your case, include why you're doing your research, your procedural posture. And I think, Jimoh, you mentioned it, when you start and we chose legal research because it's such a tough area. But now that we've put in that hard time, we're starting to be able to make the system do some really amazing things that you otherwise couldn't have done if you didn't go from the ground up in the way we did. And you saw some of the stuff we've done around summarization of text, and it's instant. And I mean, I am a co-founder and I knew these things were coming, but when I see it happen, I still think it blows me away, and I'm part of it. So I think what's coming next are some really exciting things, and I will show you also in the next day or so.
On the next podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from a technology perspective, one of the things that surprised me when I first started talking to Andrew about how he did legal research and how other lawyers often do legal research is they start very broad and then they go narrow with their keyword or Boolean searches. So it's sort of like a upside down pyramid. And then I was just like, Andrew, why don't you just get straight to the point and then widen out? So find that relevant decision and then expand out from there, and then look at the citations and the treatments. And then, but the problem is that these keyword search based legal research engines, they look at your query like the words are independent of each other. But in real life, words relate to each other, they modify each other, and that context adds meaning, which they don't really look at. So that's one of the things that we try to capture in our automatic analysis of the queries when we're looking for the right decision that's responsive to, that's relevant to the legal issue and the facts. And then the other thing that I heard over and over again was that it was so time consuming and painstaking figuring out the right terms to use, because you have this question in your head, but you don't know what words the judge used. Did the judge use finger, or did they use digit, which is the medical term?
Right.
So that's another thing. Like, what words, what phrases semantically mean the same thing? So these sound like trivial problems because humans are so natural at doing this.
Yeah.
But from a tech perspective, it's really, really, really hard. And this is what we obsess over, is understanding language and finding actual answers to questions rather than documents that just contain keywords that you have to sift through.
So understanding language and understanding the context in which the language is being used, so that you can combine that to deliver more precise results.
Yeah. There's a saying in natural language processing that words are characterized by the company that they keep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it seems like one of the ways also in which the product has evolved is in the market you're going after to some extent. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed that earlier on you were kind of focusing much more on the larger firm market, and now you've expanded that really across firms of all sizes. And in fact, I think you were telling me earlier today that increasingly the biggest, fastest growing customer base is probably in the solo and small market right now.
Yeah. It was actually
is that intentional, or is that just sort of happened in some natural way? Or
I think it's a combination of two things. One, it kind of happened naturally in some ways, but I also think it was always, when we thought of Ross and we thought of who the tool and our software would have the biggest impact on. I mean, I was at a firm of about 4 lawyers, and one thing that was always frustrating for me is I look at the opposing counsel in their firm, and I see they have an army of junior folks to do a whole bunch of legwork that always kind of just felt unfair. And so there was always a passion within us to ensure that the tool was affordable by everyone. But now I think, in particular, what's led to us getting such a huge influx of solo and small law firm folks is the fact that we have opened up the system so anyone can try it. We do a 14-day free trial. They like it, they don't like it, they can compare, they can contrast. But I also think another fun thing that we've done is have our pricing so that it's month to month. rather than locking someone in. And so that means sometimes you could be a small law firm or a solo, and you have an issue that you do need to do research on. You bring in Ross, you pay for a month or two, then you don't have research the next month, you just don't pay for it. And I think that has led to really good word of mouth within the solo small law firm community, where they we were talking, I mentioned to Bob as well, like when someone says, hey, I went with you guys over anyone else because your pricing model suggests you really care about us, that makes us feel good. And so we still are spreading, I think, very organically through the AmLaw 100, 200, and the large law firms. And I would say we also announced partnerships with bar associations. So the majority of the market, it's 80%, many say is solo and small law firms. So I think in many ways, we started with some of those large law firms who are traditionally known for, innovation and putting money in that budget into it. But the tool is super affordable, and I think it's been really fun.
Yeah.
It brings a lot of satisfaction to the whole team when we can see the day-to-day impact it has.
Yeah, and talking to a lot of our customers, the month-to-month model means a lot to them. Like one of our customers was saying that, like, because it's month to month, we have to earn her business every month because she could decide not to renew. And that means a lot rather than being locked into a long-term contract. We have to be on our best behavior. We have to keep on innovating to earn her business back every month. Yeah. So our customers really love that, and it's also more flexible, like Andrew said, and just works more with their business.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Something that you've been in the past been subject to criticism from me but from others, because I've heard others criticize you for this, was that for a long time you made it very hard to see the product.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I was never able to test the product for one. Not that I hold gripes, Anthony, but grudges rather. But I mean, this actually came up once at a AALL meeting where people were talking about it and saying, we want to see it, and we don't understand why we can't see it. You've gone 180 degrees from there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple factors there. One, early days, especially when you're working on something like that, you want to ensure that the pressure on your tech team isn't so high that they're innovating in a room with fluorescent lighting and a gallery. Because when you're building a product, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I thought, and from what I saw in the legal tech world, was there wasn't really, before us, I think Clio, again, I shout out to them because they're doing it, but not a lot of companies had released a product and then iterated on it almost on a weekly basis, right, where what you saw one day literally was not what you saw the next day, which was the next day, which was the next day. And because I didn't think that there was that kind of open culture for it, I kind of got worried with it. But I also think there was an element of not wanting to add that pressure. And by that time, Bob, when you hear the term like AI, there was already so many articles saying AI is going to replace lawyers, et cetera. So there was so much craze around the things. And I think, Jimoh, you have a really great story that kind of puts it nicely around like the invention of the car, if you want to, because that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I always like to describe the hype around AI is like, if when Carl Benz invented the automobile, like all the reporters were saying, oh my God, someone invented a teleportation machine, and people showed up and saw this guy like driving at 40 miles per hour and says, that's not teleportation. It was like, yeah, but like he's going 40 miles per hour. It's like it's an automated carriage. Yeah. So it's really important to manage expectations in that way.
Yeah. But you have now gone 180 degrees. What was it, 2 or 3, 4 months ago now, you opened up, basically anybody can come in and sign up for a free trial and try your software. And they don't have to put money down up front. They don't have to sign up for a sales demo or something like that.
No. Some people like the sales demo.
Well, they may like it. I'm sure you'd be happy to give it to them if they want it. But
no, but I think part of that too, Bob, is when the tool is at a point where it still changes. And I mean, you saw some meetings about things that are going in, and it changes faster than I'd say almost any other tool in the market because of the way that we've brought in very modern approaches to software development that you just don't see in other companies. But it's at a point where we feel very comfortable that, someone jumps in there, 1 year experience, 10 years experience, starting their career, ending their career, and it's across every practice area. That was another challenge. If we're available across one practice area and someone comes from another practice area, they don't even know what question to ask. So I just, it was early days. We started getting so much coverage, and we were only like 3-4 months old. So there was still, you know what it was too, Bob? Some of that, hey, you know what? I'll be right back to that meeting. I try to figure things out as we go. But I'm really happy now. I mean, people love to just pop into the tool, and it's been fun.
Yeah.
So you have already teased me with talk of new investors and new features in your product that'll be coming down the road at some point. But what's apart from sort of specifics like that? What's the bigger vision? Where do you see this company going? Where do you want it to go? What do you want it to become?
Well, we want to be the AI platform.
Now that Andrew's reached 30.
Yeah. I'm gonna retire now.
We want it to be the AI platform for the law. What we've been developing is technology to understand legal language, and you could imagine all the applications for that. We want to make lawyers as effective and efficient as possible. We want to augment them with all the intelligence that we have at our technological disposal.
Yeah. So, I mean, what would be something? I don't have much of an imagination. What would be something beyond what you're doing now?
I'll throw some out there. I think one of the things that continues to amaze us, and again, I think we're really lucky that we've had so many people from around the world fall in love with like Ross, our mission, the fact that we're kind of bringing a very modern kind of build to this, and they see the people we hire and the way we do things. And so international expansion is kind of isn't maybe not as sexy as the kind of, what would come next, but that is certainly something that makes a lot of sense, and we've already solved certain problems and we can do that. But then I think if you think about how Google continued to evolve from search. They solved search, and then they built an ecosystem of capabilities around that. And if our system, when you think about it, if our system continues to progress in a way that it truly understands legal language, text, and questions, we could build out a variety of different capabilities that help maybe in the filing of something, maybe in just kind of further along in workflows. And so we like to look at where do we fit in currently in a lawyer's workflow, and then where does it make sense for us to continue to expand within.
Yeah. Is that how you see it as well? I mean, does that fit with your vision of it? We were talking, I think you mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but we were also talking about this earlier today, that both of you came from, I don't want to say disadvantaged, that's probably not the right word, but not wealthy backgrounds. Yeah. I mean, you didn't come from a lot of money. Your families weren't rich growing up. And we all know that there is continues to be a huge issue we're here in Canada, but in the United States, I'm sure in Canada and in any number of other countries around the world, with getting access to legal services. Do you see that AI has a role to play in enhancing access to justice, enhancing access to legal services?
I mean, I'd say 100%. I think the challenges with tech, and it's satirized in things like Silicon Valley, the TV show, is everyone wants to say, technology is going to make the world better no matter what, right? But I do think in law specifically, it's one of the most kind of perfect situations where technology can help with a massive problem. When you have the ability for a tool to scale what a lawyer can do, that means they could help more clients. So there's that way. But there's also a lot of time people don't even know their problems are legal. So the idea of how do people now interact with things? My wife's a doctor. People go on to WebMD way too much. I do. Every time I show up, I'm dying of something horrific. And it's actually kind of maybe just a mosquito bite, right? All of a sudden it's Ebola, And I think we annoy them with that, but I bring that up as kind of a humorous way to say, I think there's a lot to come from a bunch of different companies operating where, and you see that happening. And I think part of, and what's essential to that is the changing regulations in the space. And I think you're seeing that in states like Utah and states like California. And I do think right now, 2019 is absolutely historical for a couple forces. Technology's changing, as well as the there's a very strong desire and activity around regulatory reform. So I don't think it's just, hey, technology, our dog walking app is going to make the world a better place because dogs are, humans' best friends and da-da-da. No, it's a lot of people would benefit from legal services. And why we even got involved in this was because of the way we feel about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And from my point of view, like, technology is always a lever. If we go back 10 years, it used to, it would, like, think about Facebook. It took a team to build Facebook. Today, you probably could build Facebook just one person, right. in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Think about accounting. Before calculators and spreadsheets, in order to manage people's books, it took like a team.
Yeah.
So technology increases humans' capabilities and human capacity. And AI is going to do the same thing for lawyers. It's going to increase lawyers' capacity, and it's going to help, like, the lawyers that we do have serve this market of people who need legal services but don't have access to it. Yeah. And our current lawyers can't serve them because there's so much overhead just to handle one matter. So in the long term, I think we're going to really see, like, what a law firm looks like and what they're able to do change a lot.
So you're 5 years in on this. You guys were, as I said already, pretty young when you started this. No experience starting a business before.
No.
What's the biggest mistake you made?
That's a tough one.
Long list.
Was it a long list? I mean,
yeah, I think you make so many mistakes. I think a lot of it, things that legal tech specific. I don't know. I think. Why don't you jump in first and I'll think on it, because I usually am the one who. But I think one of the ones was you really think about your idea, and then you think about your initial people that you start the company with. So Jimoh and Parglas, and then what you also really have to become hyper aware of is that you're going to have to build a team, and building that team is not easy because you have to find the right people, you have to motivate people, you have to manage people. And so you can't just say, we dream of a world where AI helps, the disenfranchised and blah, 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 and then it just happens. Yeah. So I think that it's not necessarily a mistake, but a lesson, I think, is just time management, ensuring that you're making as conscious of my energy and my passion is really gets ignited, and I get really excited when I think about technology really driving a real change in access to justice, AI and the role it's going to play in the future, et cetera. I don't necessarily get as excited when it comes to subjects like one-on-one check-ins with employees or quarterly planning. And so I think some of the things that I learned was just how important it is. And now, funny enough, I was talking to Jimoh, I think this morning, about some of my plans around, like, management and changing things up. And I'm starting to get passionate about that. But I think not thinking about the management, the team building as much as I should have, maybe.
Yeah. And for me, I think one of the mistakes, it sounds pretty benign, but managing my energy and managing the energy of the people I'm responsible for. Like, in the early days, we were just pulling all-nighters, working days on end without sleep. Me and Andrew would be, like, talking about some feature or some redesign. I'd be like, okay, me and Parglas are going to redesign the whole app. We'll be done in 2 days, and then we would not sleep. So, like, when you think about startups, you think about, like, that kind of mindset and attitude, but you can't keep on doing that because burnout creeps in, and it's so slow you don't even know when you're in it. And if you're in a bad mood, the data that you're collecting from your environment is very selective. And also how you, as a leader, how you your mood, your energy, how you treat people has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So realizing that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's not about your top speed. It's about how fast can you go for a sustained period of time.
Yeah.
It seems really simple, but
No, it makes sense.
You're
it makes
10
sense.
times more productive.
And there's only
that
so
way.
much Mountain Dew a guy can drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally.
Exactly.
And I think part of that is managing expectations even of as you grow the team, because there's a certain passion level that you get from an all-nighter, but you get to 20 employees, 30, 40, 50, 60. Like, things change as you get larger and larger, where it doesn't make sense to say we're all just going to stay awake for 3 days straight. People have families.
I have a family.
Like, I'm married now, right? So it just changes.
Yeah, I just got a cat.
Yeah.
His name is Mango. It's very cute.
It's an adorable cat.
Well, let me give each of you the last word before we wrap up here. Final thoughts, predictions, oversight, anything we forgot to talk about?
Well, I want to give Jimoh the last word because I speak so much that I think,
You were pretty balanced here.
That's good. I've been working on that. I think for me, what I'd love to say is I think the time is now for people to have a good tempered discussion around the value of AI, how it's working, how it's not. I think I would really welcome everyone to try our tool, try other tools. Obviously, try Ross first. But joking aside, I think it's one thing to get excited about concepts and ideas, and it's another thing to get really excited about a specific product. And I think we've done a lot with Ross, and I think in a very short amount of time, we've established ourselves as someone to be large amounts of lawyers' preferred research tool. I think is something that brings me a lot of personal satisfaction, I know, with the team. So I think what I would say to people is, look, I've never felt that in legal technology and in law, we're at more of a time of influx and change, and I actually truly see the light ahead. Not talking about Ross, I'm talking about us as an industry. Like, with California's talking about, changing things very deeply when it comes to regulation. Utah's following suit. You're seeing what's happening in the UK. I traveled to Singapore and I go to a legal tech event, and the clients are excited. The law firms are excited. The ministers of various aspects of their government show up. This is amazing, and it's happening worldwide. And so I know that there's a lot of people who have put in a lot of hard work, including you, Bob, in this space to get people excited and to keep people motivated. And I feel like the best is yet to come, and we're about to do some really amazing things as an industry.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you for you're serving on that California task force on what's it called? Access to legal services or something? The future of legal services?
Hashtag ATILS on Twitter for short. You'll find everything. But I mean, if
hashtag
you're not,
what is it?
Hashtag ATILS, ATILS. And I really feel like anyone who's listening to this podcast, agree, disagree with the regulatory reform, make your voice heard. We have, right now it's open for public comment, but the world is changing, and I really feel like the legal market is changing right now in such amazing ways. It's exciting.
It is. So, Jimoh, you get the last word.
Last word. Okay. I just want to give a shout out to our loyal customers if you're listening. And if you're not one of our customers, we would love to talk to you about how we can help.
I love how you're now the marketing and sales one, and I like that. Yeah. And a big thank you to everyone in the space for motivating us, and a big thank you for everyone who continues to kind of make this all happen. As an industry, this is really amazing.
Well, and thanks to you guys for taking the time to sit down with me and do this, and for hosting me in your office up here in Toronto. It's been a lot of fun to get to see that and get to see you. So we've been talking with Andrew Arruda, CEO of Ross Intelligence, and Jimoh Ovbiagele. Right? Ovbiagele.
Close enough.
No, what did I do wrong that time? Ovbiagele?
Ovbiagele.
I got the accent wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, Ovbiagele. I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
And it's been a real pleasure to talk to you guys.